No, that would be highly inappropriate. And I would not do that. I'm so sorry that you started. Anything before we say the jurors?
No, Your Honor.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Is that your table?
Not mine personally. Yep.
Please.
Watch yourself coming in. Please be seated.
Let's resume the trial.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, sir. How you doing? Good. How are you? Just dandy. Okay. Just kind of start off with, like we talked this morning, you are not here to give this jury an opinion that this incident here was a failure of memory systems, correct?
That's not my role here, no.
Okay. So, in not giving that opinion, you would agree that if it were proven the defendant intended to kill this child, the stuff that you told the jury really doesn't have anything to do with it, correct?
No, it wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. Okay. Just a little bit. You talked about your background, doing research and things like that. Now, you're not like a medical doctor or anything like that, correct? Like you don't do like brain imaging or anything of that nature?
No, we do brain imaging. We use electroencephalography, so we record electrical potentials from the cortex over the scalp as people are completing some of our cognitive tasks.
Okay, those are was it like a little helmet you put on or something?
Yeah, it's just like a scalp cap, like a helmet.
Right.
There's electrodes and the wires come out, and we're recording the electrical potentials.
I got you. Not like CT scans, MRIs. You don't do those.
No, I mean I've done fMRI research, but a CT scan is like an X-ray kind of. MRI is a picture of the inside of your body, and you can use functional magnetic resonance imaging, which measures the blood flow. So we've done functional magnetic resonance imaging studies. They're very expensive, and so we try to stay on the less expensive side.
Right, you got to save money, right? Working in education. Okay, as far as the studies that you do with patients and things like that, I don't even know if they're patients, they would be subjects, correct? You don't see actual patients and treat them as a psychologist or anything of that nature.
I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm not a clinical.
Right, I guess, for lack of a better term, you're more of an academic. Would that be safe to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And with the research that you guys do in a lab and things like that, obviously you're not trying to replicate the forgetting of something as serious as a child or anything like that. Would that be true?
That's not true. So we do try to replicate the phenomenon that happens in the world, but of course, with something as severe as this case, there's no way to replicate that.
Exactly.
But, I mean,
you're getting as close as you can, but there's no way to do that specifically. Say, okay, we're going to have you forget something as serious as forgetting your child and see how things work.
We can't do that.
All right. You would agree, as a researcher, you're just not going to take somebody's word for it, correct? If somebody tells you something, you're going to actually verify it.
Yeah, I want to collect data, quantify behavior, and use it to make inference.
Okay, especially if you're given initial information and it doesn't make common sense or anything like that, you're going to check it out, right? And see, why does this not make sense?
I'd like to believe that I'll check out all the information, not just the things that don't make sense to me.
Right. And as when you give an opinion or you're talking about certain things, as a researcher, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're given bad information, your opinions could be pretty much completely opposite of what you thought originally. Would you agree with that?
That would be a true statement.
Now, you talked a little bit about, routine. Now, routine, you talked a little bit about habit and routine. Now, is that something you're doing daily, or where does that come on the continuum? When does it become a habit or routine?
There's
like 50%, 75%, 25%?
A lot of different ways to think about how to quantify that. One way that we think about routine is we think about expertise. So can you do something without any cost to other tasks that are happening simultaneously? And so that would be one way that you could quantify it.
Now, we talked a little bit, too, about, you said, in general, these cases where a child may have been left in the car. And you're aware there are cases where children are intentionally left in the car, correct?
No, I'm not aware of those.
Where a child...
Intentionally?
Intentionally. Yes.
Okay. Yes, I am aware of those.
Okay. And in the cases where you're talking about this brain memory failure, you'd agree that, from what you understand, you get a lot of your information from Dr. Diamond.
No.
I mean, when you talk about summaries of these types of cases?
Oh, the summarizations of
yes.
the failures that happen in cases of children being left in cars.
Mm-hmm.
There's a researcher, his name is David Diamond, Dr. Diamond, and he's the one who has summarized a lot of these cases and written about them. So when I talk about my knowledge about this phenomenon, the real-world phenomenon of children being left in cars, I'm referring to his work.
Okay.
Not to my personal experience with any of these cases.
And from listening to him on those things, you agree that in most of the cases where a child, there's allegedly, as far as people determine, or Dr. Diamond's determined there's been a failure of the memory system, most of those the child is out of view of the driver, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Most of those, the car seat's either behind the driver or something like that, correct?
In the back seat, yes.
In the back seat behind the driver, okay?
In the back seat.
All right. Would you agree that most of them are behind the driver, out of view? The child is?
Yes, I mean, any time that a child is unintentionally left in the back seat of a car, the child seat must be out of view.
Okay. All right. And also, in most of those cases, you would agree that the parent or caretaker, whoever it is, has traveled a much greater distance than we have here, correct? Than a 0.6 mile drive.
I'm not familiar with the lengths or the durations of the drives.
Okay. Are you familiar with any case where it was this short?
No.
And you said also a lot of these cases are where something stressful happens during the drive, or there's some kind of distraction. You would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So, when you said there's nothing unique about this case as opposed to others, that's not really correct, is it?
Oh, okay. So, to clarify,
so first of all, what you need to what first you need to do is say answer yes or no, and once you do, if it's a yes or no question, then you can answer me with explaining if you need to. Okay?
Sure. So the answer is, would you rephrase, or would you just restate the question? Just so I'm sure I'm
okay.
It correctly?
You said on direct that there is nothing unique about this case as compared to the other cases you've seen.
No.
Okay. Now, have you ever encountered a case where, or known about a case where the person who left the child in the car was sexting other women and men the night before?
No.
Have you ever had a case where they were sexting other women and men the morning of, leading up to it?
Well, I've never worked on any of these cases, but I'm not aware of any of them.
Okay, and I'll just ask you based on what Dr. Diamond has told you. Are you aware of any of those cases?
I haven't personally spoke with Dr. Diamond about this case.
Okay, not about this, about the other cases. You said this case is not unique. I'm asking about some things that are unique about this case to the general cases that you have studied and learned from Dr. Diamond about. Okay? So, are you familiar with any other case where the parent has gone back into the car and thrown light bulbs into the car in the middle of the day?
No, I'm not familiar with a parent throwing light bulbs into the car in the middle of the day.
Have you ever been familiar with any of these cases where the defendant said, I need an escape from my son and I love my son and all, but we both need escapes 10 minutes before locking him in the car?
No, I'm not familiar with any case that's the parent has said that.
Okay. Are you familiar with any case where the parent has continued that same conversation and the next response he has in that conversation is during the drive with the child?
No, I'm not familiar with any case, but I'm also unclear whether that happened during the drive.
Okay.
That's what we talked about this morning.
Right. And if the time frame is that message was sent at 9:24, and that was during the time between the time the defendant left Chick-fil-A and the time the defendant arrived and got out of his car, that's what I'm talking about. Then you would not be familiar with that, correct? That you've ever seen that?
No, I would not be familiar with that. I've never seen that before.
You agree in this case there was actually, you've seen the text where the defendant's wife actually texted him if he got to work okay that morning, correct?
I believe you sent that to me.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few things I sent you that the defense had not shown you, correct?
There were some things I believe that I saw from you that I don't remember seeing from the defense, yes.
Did they ever show you the forensic evidence from the defendant's cell phone? Did they give you a disc with all of the chats and things like that?
Oh, no, I don't have access to all of the chats. I just have the ones that were believed to be directly relevant to the memory component, because that's what my testimony is about.
Wouldn't the forensic evidence of what he was doing on his phone leading up to Chick-fil-A possibly be relevant as far as distraction, fatigue, things like that? Things you would want to know what he was doing that night, since you've already talked about the emails from that night. Wouldn't you want to know the other things he was doing?
Well, sure.
Okay. Have you had any other case where, or come across one where the defendant had parked and was hanging out in the car with the child for around 30 seconds or over 30 seconds?
No, I'm not familiar with any cases like that.
How about where they had to get their briefcase to their right, where the car seat was, right there to the right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, let me ask you.
I don't understand the question.
That was a poor question. Okay, were you aware that the defendant had his briefcase in the passenger seat beside him?
Yes, I was aware of that.
Were you aware he had to reach over and get it?
I was aware.
Were you aware the car seat was right there?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I was not aware that the car seat was beside his briefcase.
Okay. No, right there. Okay. In between, right here. You've seen the photographs of where the car seat is, right?
Yeah, you sent me the photograph too.
Yes.
Was taken.
So I actually provided that to you.
Yeah, you provided that to me.
Did the defense provide that to you?
I don't believe so. I don't remember.
Okay. And you realize he also got his Chick-fil-A cup to take into work that day,
Yeah.
where he had just gone in and eaten with his son. And you realize when he stops for lunch on those days, after taking Cooper to Little Apron, that he actually also has food. So on those days, he doesn't just have a cup, he has a food in his cup, correct? So this would have not been like those other days, as far as what he's taken into work.
Yeah, there would have been the absence of the food, which would have been different here.
Which could have been, I think, as you said, a cue, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been the same as a physical cue.
Right.
The absence of something is not the same as something being there, but we do know that the absence of something can also trigger an intention. So, but slight difference.
Right. And then you also talked about it'd be important, something would be a good cue if the daycare called to remind him or to notify them the child wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're aware the defendant knew full well that they do not follow up on that the daycare does not call when a child is absent. Were you aware the defendant full well knew that's kind of how they operate?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Those are things you would want to know coming into this, correct? For good or ill, for whatever importance it has, you would want to have all that information, correct?
I would want as much information as I could get relevant to what it was that I was going to be talking about, yes.
Okay. And one thing you talked about that was, I guess, really kind of plays against a memory failure in this case, or is not supportive of it. You phrase it better than I say.
It can hurt.
Okay. One thing that is the importance of the object, correct? And so if it's something, you would agree there's almost nothing more, or there is nothing more important as a parent than your duty to your child and your child.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay. And that can even be, what is the part of the brain that deals with emotion and things like that? I can't say it. Amygdala?
I can't say it. I try to say it.
You're the researcher.
It's amygdala. So we have a lot of research about emotion and how emotional stimuli or events in your environment will activate parts of your brain. And one of the parts of the brain that Mr. Bourne is referring to is the amygdala.
And that can be good or bad, correct? Like good emotion, bad emotion can activate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got something starting with the starting point that that person, that child is that important to you. And let's take it a step further that the defendant actually remembered later or remembered talking several times about the fact that right before he left, he not only put the child in the car, but kissed the child. The child kissed him back. Would that also be something that may be even more of importance or show more importance to remembering rather than being a memory failure?
No, I don't see how it would.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if you ask it in a different way, maybe I'd understand better what you're.
Okay. You said importance it cuts against it, the level of importance of the object.
But the way that I understand your question is you're saying that if he kisses his child or interacts with his child, that suddenly the child becomes more important.
No.
That's
I'm sorry.
Confused.
Okay.
The child's going to be maximally important no matter what kind of interactions they have.
But maybe what I'm trying to say, maybe I totally asked this poorly, but that shows the defendant is even more aware of that important thing if he's able to describe and he's doing things and interacting with his child right before driving.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it signals no more level of importance than just putting the child in. I mean, that's my layperson interpretation, not psychological or expert interpretation.
How about the fact that that important thing was actually communicating with him and actually talked to him right as he was leaving, right as he was about to leave?
I mean, in terms of a memory failure,
Yeah.
I don't see how, in any obvious way, that would be any different than just putting the child in.
So if the child said, okay, sorry.
And the inherent value of having a child and taking care of that child and making sure that that child is, taken care of. Sorry. I don't think that interacting with it any more or less is going to change in terms of whether or not you remember it because it's an important thing. It's an important thing.
And we'll talk about, I think what I'm maybe trying to get more to is senses. The senses and being able to sense the presence of that thing as to whether it's a failure of memory systems or not. That's important, correct? Okay. For instance, hearing, being able to hear. It would be important to know that child was awake when they were leaving. Would that be important to you?
Yes, that would be important to me as an expert.
Yes.
To know whether or not, the child was sending off signals. I'm back here. Making noise, movement, touching, potentially, anything that we could sense. All of those are important things to know.
And you're aware that before they left, the child actually responded to the defendant with the word school, knowing he's going to school.
I'm aware that the defendant Ross said that.
Okay.
And that I've read those statements, the transcripts.
Okay.
So yes, I'm aware that he said that his son mentioned school to him.
All right. You have to bear with me. My handwriting is terrible. I know you talked a little bit about how you communicate in the scientific community, research community with each other and things like that. And you and I talked about somebody I've talked to, Randall Engel at Georgia Tech. I think you called him your something grandfather?
Yeah, academic grandfather. So the same way you think about your dad, right? I would think about my advisor, and then his advisor would be his dad, but that would be my granddad. So we have this weird way that we talk about our academic lineage. And so Randy is a professor, Dr. Engel, at Georgia Tech. Very well-respected psychologist. He does cognitive research on working memory, which is one of my topical areas as well.
And when we talked about that, we discussed some of the things that can also significantly impact whether if somebody's memory failure or not. Does their memory fail or not? One thing we talked about is the health of the person. Is it somebody that's older, may have memory issues, things like that, or is middle-aged, normal person, their health? That's important, correct?
Absolutely. What we're referring to is that there's what we call a developmental trajectory. So children can't use memory and attention very well, and then they mature and they get better at using it over the course of their life until they reach a certain age, and then there's a decline in terms of your cognitive abilities. And this is natural. It happens to all of us. So, there's probably an optimal place where your cognitive functioning is at its peak level in terms of your age and your health.
Also, I hate to say it, but people who are smarter, they have better, was it fluid memory?
Yeah, so we call that fluid intelligence, okay, which is a great way to think about it is just your horsepower. I don't know, I think about myself, I don't have, you can think about how intelligent someone is, not just by how much they know. So you have friends that could go and do trivia and really do well at trivia. But you can also think about how good they are at processing information. How much horsepower do they have? And so when we talk about horsepower, we usually refer to that in cognitive psychology as general fluid intelligence. When we talk about your knowledge about things, right, your facts that you know, we refer to that as crystallized intelligence. It's more permanent. Same way that I'm saying your cognitive abilities change over your lifetime, really interesting fact is that your crystallized intellectual abilities don't decline as you age. So you generally will find that older adults have better vocabulary than younger adults. But general fluid abilities, general fluid intellectual abilities do decline with age. And so as you age, you're losing horsepower. But you still know a lot about the world. That's not all.
All right, good. So basically what we're getting at is if they're smarter, then they're less likely to forget.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And when you talk about trivia, did you talk to the defense about that last night, about that trivia, about a trivia topic by chance?
No.
Okay. We talked about also somebody who's good at multitasking.
Mm-hmm.
That would be somebody who is much less likely to forget if they're good at multitasking, correct?
Well, there's two ways to think about that. People that are good at multitasking, and then let's classify that. So we can measure everybody's ability to multitask, and we know this person is better than all the other people at multitasking. Then we have them do a prospective memory test. They're going to do better on that prospective memory test. So the answer to that question is yes. However, if they're multitasking and they've got a lot of things going on, and one of those things is a prospective memory thing, even if they're good at multitasking, they could still have a failure because they can't divert all of their concentration to that one thing.
But if they're not doing much else except driving, then that's not going to come in play. They're good at multitasking, but they're not multitasking, then that's still less likely to forget. Would you
Less
agree?
likely, yes, that's absolutely true. People that can multitask are less likely to forget.
We talked about the importance. Also, you would agree that the duration of the incident or the time, that makes it less likely that it's a memory failure as well, given if it's shorter in duration versus longer.
You know something, I've thought a lot about this issue with specific elements of this case, because you can think about it in terms of, well, it's just a short duration, but as
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. I think I asked him in general if that makes it less likely rather than as far as a failure of memory system. So I'd ask, if he wants to explain it, that's fine. I just ask that he answer my question first before we go off.
That's good.
All right. So my question was just kind of directly, if there is a shorter in duration, I guess distance or time, does that make it less likely to have a memory failure than a longer time?
That's a question that you can't give a yes or no answer to.
Okay. All right. And we've talked before. You've told me that is something that can affect it and make it less likely, though. You've said that to me before, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I've also, think about it. If you're trying to remember something and I allow you to sit here forever, you have a higher likelihood of remembering it just because you have more time. So in one way, having more time helps. There's more opportunities for new cues. There's more opportunities for new trains of thought. There's more opportunities for these just spontaneous retrievals of intentions. So a longer time period actually could be more beneficial. But a longer time period, more forgetting can happen. It's not a very direct answer. There's lots of factors that are at play when you're thinking about time and memory.
Well, let's move on from that then, since there's no direct answer. Let's talk about, I think you're talking about using as cues or something like that. You said something that it's an issue where I guess you're going along doing whatever, and then you catch yourself because you've got this cue, correct? All right. And if you get a cue might increase or would increase the likelihood that there would not be a failure of memory, correct?
Absolutely correct. Cues increase. Appropriate cues, good cues, and even bad cues will increase the likelihood, because if they're not there, there's no thing in the world that signals to you behave this way now. So cues are always going to be helpful.
And that would include sight, being able to see something. That would include smell. Would you agree with that? Also, a cue could be that I guess in a case like this, the child's only inches from you.
No, spatial proximity, which is what we talk about, but I mean, we don't have to use technical words. Mm-hmm. Closeness, I'm not sure that any of that matters. I'm not aware of any literature that says that I remember something because it's closer versus further away from me.
How about if it's moving behind you, you can feel it move?
Oh, if you can feel it, yes, absolutely.
How about if it's closer and you can see it? Because it's right there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now we talked about the Chick-fil-A cup. That could be a cue, correct? That he had in his car, he picked it up. That could be a cue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that could be even more of a cue if he had just described this really important breakfast that he just had with his son. That could even be more of a cue if it meant that to him.
It could be a cue for him to remember the breakfast with the son. Okay. And it could also be a reminder for him that he forgot to take his son. But how he interprets that cup is also determining its effectiveness as a cue. Right? Remember, I said that there's a physical thing in the world, right? The cue, as we're calling it. But there's also how you consider the cue. And so when you see the Chick-fil-A cup, if you're not thinking about the Chick-fil-A cup, in this case, as being related to the daycare and dropping the child off at the daycare, its effectiveness as a cue is marginalized.
And then if it's out of the routine that you've got the Chick-fil-A cup and no food, that would be a cue.
That would be a cue. It would be a different type of cue. It would be the absence of a cue. So there would be no food.
Another cue could be sitting down right beside your child again. Like sitting right there in that seat beside that child. That may trigger you.
Yeah, absolutely. That may trigger you.
Going back to your car, that could be a cue, correct?
That could be a cue, yeah.
Getting an email about something that you thought was important to you and the child 10 minutes after leaving the child in the car, that could be a cue.
That could be a cue.
Again, another thing making it less likely that there's a failure of memory systems. Also, responding to a message that you had just been engaged in involving talking about your son while you're still in the car, that could be a cue.
Mm-hmm.
That would make it less likely that it was a failure of memory systems. Again, you talk.
I'm really sorry about that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
You said that would make it less likely that it's a failure of a memory system.
Mm-hmm.
It would make it less likely that the memory system failed.
Okay.
Not that it's a failure of the memory system. There's, a slight wording there that means a lot.
Okay. Also, mentioning the child a little more than an hour after and bringing the child up and talking about the morning, that also would signify being however you would say it.
That would be a cue that could serve as a reminder that something went wrong, that you forgot to take the child. All of these things that we're talking about could be reminders, yes.
And people asking about your son at work.
That could be a reminder, yes.
Okay, in a case like this, you want to look at the whole picture, right? I mean, I know there's some things you weren't given, some things you looked at later, some things you still don't know about the case. You would agree with that? And it's very important getting a history of something, getting the delineation of what actually occurred that day as close in time to the act occurring. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because over time, maybe motivations change, maybe memory changes, things like that. Okay. Okay. Were you aware that the defendant said he was not distracted with anything in this case? To the police when he talked to them the night of the incident?
Yes, I was.
Were you aware that he also told them he wasn't stressed that day, that he made no statements about a lack of sleep?
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware that nobody has come in here and testified, no one has given any evidence that he was stressed out at all that day, from the time he woke up to the time he got off work?
You know, I'm not aware of the evidence that's been presented in court.
Okay. That would be contrary then, though, to saying that he was stressed out about work or a job or something like that, correct? If there was no other evidence about that, and if the defendant himself said he wasn't stressed out.
Well, absence of evidence doesn't indicate evidence of absence, but
Well,
if there wasn't anything that indicated, like the email that he sent the night before saying that he was having trouble, and knowing that Cooper woke him up early, so that we know that there was not as much sleep as maybe he would routinely get and what people normally get.
We'll talk about the sleep in a minute. I'm talking about the stress of the job, his job stress. If there is not one person who said he's not stressed, everybody has said that he did not appear
I'm
stressed.
going to object to that. That is an absolute mischaracterization of the evidence.
I haven't heard one
Andre
person.
Brown, he has mischaracterized the evidence. I'm objecting.
Judge, I believe the evidence is clear. Nobody's come in here and said he was stressed out that day.
I believe we heard from Andre Brown that talked about him being frustrated, specifically about the work project in an email, and that he was aware that next morning that he was in fact frustrated.
These are all questions of fact the jury's going to have to resolve, and the questions within proper cross-examination and the law.
Thank you.
The jury will have to determine what the evidence proves.
Were you aware that his wife says he wasn't stressed out that morning?
I was not aware of anything that his wife said regarding his stress.
All right. Let's see. Okay, I know you talked a little bit about, I think, a good segue to fatigue. We talked about fatigue a little bit. Now, you've read the defendant's statement, or seen a transcript, or seen the interview of his statement to the police and his history of the case, correct? Okay. And when you reviewed it, you saw that he said Cooper woke up early that morning, but then he put him in the bed with him, and Cooper went back to sleep, correct? Did he say anything about what he was doing that time during the morning until they got out of bed?
Not that I can remember that.
So you're assuming that he actually did not go back to sleep?
Well, I'm not assuming that because you told me what he was doing.
Okay. Well, let me tell you this. If the evidence shows that once Cooper got up, he put him back in bed, that for the next 15 minutes or so, he was messaging other women, okay? And then there's a gap between that messaging of other women from 5:50-something to 7:20-something. You don't know if he was sleeping or not during that time, correct?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
But what we do know, or what I told you, is the evidence is definitely between that time, he was on the phone messaging other women and sexting and things like that. You aware that he never said he was sleepy that morning?
Yeah, I believe I'm aware that he said he was never sleeping.
He said that what? I'm sorry?
That he wasn't sleeping.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't think he ever claimed he was sleepy. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you have any evidence that anybody claimed he looked sleepy at work or anything like that?
No, I have no evidence that anybody at work claimed. I haven't had anybody at work or read anything.
You talked about maybe him being in a hurry to get to work and things like that because of the shaving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm going to object. I think that's a mischaracterization. I don't think this witness testified about him being in a hurry.
Well, I'll ask it again. What were you saying the significance of the not shaving was?
With prospective memory failures, so that there's these factors, health and hurt. One of the factors was fatigue. There's things we know about this time period leading up to Chick-fil-A that would indicate that there was some mental and potentially physical fatigue. They're just markers. I don't know whether the defendant was fatigued or not. But I do know that the defendant didn't get as much sleep as a normal person gets. I do know that the defendant expressed dissatisfaction with his own performance on his job, which that really weighs heavy on me. I assume it does on everybody. And I do know that he had a disheveled appearance, at least in terms of the shape.
Okay.
None of those things in and of themselves mean that he was fatigued. But, when you look at him, that's a possibility.
Do you know anything about how much he cared about his job at that point?
No, I don't. I don't know what he was thinking about the job.
Okay. Did you know that morning, if he was, you were saying he was worried about this project and things, you were worried he went in late that day, right? He went in later because
I'm going
Cooper's.
to object to that. I believe the testimony was that he didn't have any particular work schedule, that he came and went as he needed to. There's been no testimony that he went in late. None.
I'll rephrase it. Were you aware the defendant said in his interview with the police that he was running late?
No, I don't remember.
He was running later than he wanted to, and that he decided since he was running late, he was going to take time out and go to Chick-fil-A with his son. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
That does not signify a hurry to get to work because you're worried about your work performance, does it?
No. I certainly wouldn't think so.
And leaving early to go to an early movie that day, that doesn't signify being worried about your job or having to stay late because you got some project due or anything like that, right?
I don't want to.
I want to ask you to
I don't want to be
speculate.
unbalanced here, but
Yeah.
Maybe a person can naturally say, "I'm working really hard on this. Maybe I need a break, and a break would be good for me, and I can come back fresh." Of course, I don't know whether that was in his mind, and I don't know whether the stress was in. I don't know what he was thinking.
Did you realize he was actually starting a new project that day and was going to a meeting for the new project?
Yes, I do know that.
Did you know that was just like a meet and greet he didn't have to do any prep for?
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew that.
All right. So no inkling about that was stressful in any nature from his statement to the police or anything like that, correct?
The only inkling I have that any of this was stressful to him was an email that he sent the night before, later, around 12:30, expressing dissatisfaction with his performance. That's the entirety of my basis for saying two things.
Right.
One, he had this mental problem.
Mm-hmm.
He was frustrated. And two, it timestamps the fact that he was still awake. And that's two things that are interrelated insofar as they are consistent with fatigue.
The first thing, first of all, you don't really know how worried he was about finishing that project or not, or when he was actually supposed to finish it, or anything like that, correct?
No, I don't know that.
Okay. Did you know he was actually looking for another job?
I'm aware that he had people that he was working as a side business with.
I'm talking about something
unaware
different.
that he was applying for other jobs. I don't know that.
Okay.
That he was applying for other jobs.
So you didn't know he sent an email out, a resume, early that morning in between sending text messages at like 5:40 something a.m. You didn't know about that, correct?
No, when you told me about the text messages, you didn't tell me that he was looking for a job.
Right. And the defense didn't provide you any of those forensic computer or phone information or anything like that, correct?
No.
Were you aware that he said he was not distracted by anything that morning? He told the police that.
After you told me that.
And you want to make sure when you're getting truthful answers and things like that, and what the information you have is good. Were you aware that he never mentioned to police anything about his behaviors that night and that morning on his phone or anything of that nature?
Mm-hmm.
And you're aware that he never told the police about his trip back to the car at lunchtime. You knew that, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And were you aware that going back to his car at lunch was out of his routine?
Well, no, I didn't think about it in terms of routine because I didn't know how to quantify that.
Okay.
How often he goes and doesn't go, how often he goes to lunch.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that often in the morning. There's video. Did you know there's video of the defendant coming into work every day for the month of June?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you aware that out of those 9 days leading up to June 18th, he only brought Chick-fil-A in 4 days?
Right.
Okay. So that would not even be the majority of those days he brought Chick-fil-A in, correct?
Yeah, 4 out of the 30 is not a majority.
No.
But, he could have eaten Chick-fil-A.
But he says he always goes to the drive-thru and he goes to work, right?
He could have left the bathroom. I mean, I'm not arguing, please, I'm not arguing that he did or didn't. I'm just saying that it's not clear either way.
Okay. So it could have been possible that he went to Chick-fil-A and went to the drive-thru and ate it all and drank his drink before he got there in that short drive and just left it all in the car. Okay. It's also possible he didn't go to Chick-fil-A on those days.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely possible. Either one of those two things is possible.
And one of those days, he actually went to Chick-fil-A after dropping Cooper off at Little Aprons Academy. I think it was June 11th. That day, he actually remembered his guitar out of the back. Did you see that video too? And you're where he told the police that he actually did take Cooper to Chick-fil-A 2 or 3 times a month, correct?
I'm sorry, I was thinking about your last question. Would you ask me?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, when he goes to work and he takes his guitar, was he taking his guitar to work to play it there?
No.
He was just taking it there?
He had it in his car probably for church. I'm just guessing. You know what? I shouldn't guess.
Okay.
But it was a Wednesday, so I'm just assuming.
Sorry, my mind was just wandering. I apologize.
Okay. Were you aware that he said he told the police that he would take Cooper to Chick-fil-A 2 or 3 times a month to eat and have a daddy-son breakfast?
Yes.
Okay. And you're aware that his wife said that he would go about every 2 weeks and would go as well.
Yeah, I'm aware of that too.
Also, were you aware that Little Apron employees said that he would take Cooper to Chick-fil-A before they would come to daycare? Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that statement.
Were you aware that he actually brought the workers at Little Apron Academy food from Chick-fil-A, stopping with Cooper, getting Chick-fil-A, going to Little Apron? And were you aware that on the days that he would actually go to Chick-fil-A first and come to Little Apron, that the employees said he'd be awake when he would come in on those days?
That's a mischaracterization of the evidence.
That's absolutely the testimony.
I looked at, it's not even consistent with the videos that the jury's saying. I'm absolutely objecting.
Same question.
On the days that the defendant would go to Chick-fil-A with Cooper before going to Little Apron Academy, were you aware that the employees of Little Apron Academy said that when he would come in, after they went to Chick-fil-A first, that he would be awake?
No, I'm not aware of that. The only thing I've seen in regard to Ross and Cooper arriving at Little Aprons is just the videos of him coming in and out. In terms of his relationship with Chick-fil-A,
Yeah, you didn't talk to these witnesses. You just,
yeah.
you just had what the defense gave you.
And what you gave me when
And what I
we
gave.
talked,
Yeah.
several months ago and this weekend.
Yes, sir. I think I'm near wrapping up. Going back on fatigue, I think you said that, this was something where the lack of sleep was out of the norm for him. It was less sleep than he was used to getting, something like that.
Less sleep than a normal person gets. I don't know what his sleep routine is.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that that's a truncated, smaller time window.
Okay. Well, going back to the forensic evidence from his phone, I'm just going to go back a few days before this. Were you aware that on the 15th, on a Sunday, he was up at least at 1:38 a.m. messaging?
I'm not aware of that instance, but I am aware that he's a night owl, yes.
Okay. So he's a night owl. Okay.
That he's up till, yes.
And were you aware that he also was sending a message then again between 4:06 and 4:39 a.m. that morning, just a few hours later, sending more messages on Whisper?
Mm-hmm. Did he say he slept, or did he say that he was still up? Or
This is him being awake. I'm just giving you time periods. Were you aware he was awake from 1:38 to 3:16 a.m., on that Sunday, messaging people?
No, I was not aware of that particular.
Were you aware he was up from 4:06 at least, and I'm just going by what we have as far as times, 4:06 to 4:39 a.m., messaging other people?
No.
All right. And then were you aware that at 7 a.m. He actually sent a message, like a text message, SMS message, that he was having some issues that morning, was going to be about 15 minutes late.
And this is on the 15th.
This is on the 15th.
I'm not aware of any of his text or communications on the 15th.
So looking at that time period, it looks like he was up a lot more during that night than he was on the night leading up to the 18th. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Let's look at the 16th. Were you aware that on the 16th, at 3:32 a.m. in the morning, he started messaging back and forth with another woman, sending sexual pictures back and forth until 4:12 a.m.?
No.
Were you aware that he started back messaging at 7:10 a.m.?
No.
Again, in that window, it appears he's awake a lot more than he was in the early morning hours of the 18th. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Going to the 17th. Were you aware that he sent a Snapchat or some kind of message to an underage girl at 11:09 p.m.? I guess we're going in the night of the 16th, going into the 17th.
No, I'm not aware of his usage. What time was that?
That was 11:09 p.m. on the 16th, about to go into the 17th. Okay. Then at 3:40 a.m. he sends a message.
Mm-hmm. I did not know that.
Okay.
I'm getting the story.
Yes. You know where I'm going.
Uh-huh.
All right. 4:18 he sends another message on 6:17 a.m. 6/17/2014, and then at 7:42 a.m. he's messaging again. Looking at all those of the 3 days leading up to June 18th, you would agree if those times are correct. He actually got more sleep on the 18th than he did on those other nights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought he was just had one night of less sleep, but it looks like he had multiple nights of not sleeping as well.
So he actually got more sleep than usual on the night of the 18th.
More sleep than the last 4 days, yeah.
And so...
Probably because he was fatigued, right?
that's why he slept more? He couldn't stay up doing what he was doing the other few nights? And let's... Yes, ma'am. So, looking at it, I know you talked about this email and how it was stressful at 12:40, and he was upset about that. Did you know it was bookended? Well, you were aware he actually had Googled a child passport fee, web search for that at 12:48.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know that those two things were bookended by him talking to other women about sexual stuff and other men about sexual stuff?
I'm not familiar with the explicit details, but I do know that they're bookended by sexual communications with his phone, yes.
So that work email wasn't the only reason he was up.
Oh, no. No.
And he probably could have finished his work early and gone to bed earlier if he wasn't doing all that other stuff.
Well, that calls for speculation.
I think that's a fair common sense
We
question.
don't know if it took 2 seconds for him to send out whatever he sent, and he did his work for over a period of 4 hours. We don't know, so that will call for speculation, Judge.
And so you're asking me, could he have gotten more sleep had he not engaged in those types of activities?
Absolutely.
Well, of course he could have gotten more sleep if he had not engaged in those types of activities.
And if he would have not done those activities, maybe he could have spent more time doing his work if he was really worried about it, right? You mentioned something about a comment he said where he was talking to the police and he said, "I swear I dropped him off," right? Okay. There's also a possibility he was lying about that as well. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I have much of anything else. Can I just have a second, Your Honor? A second. No, that's maybe like 10 seconds.
I'm not.
Yes, Judge. No. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Dr. Brewer, We provided you with a tremendous amount of information in this case, didn't we?
Yes.
Do you even remember everything that we provided you with?
No.
Okay. Did we provide you with opportunities to see interviews?
Yes.
Did we provide you with the GoPro videos?
Yes.
Did we make arrangements for you to go to the route and drive and view the route?
Yes.
Did we provide anything and everything that you asked for?
Yes. Everything else.
Did you,
It's been provided by.
right, well, did you offer, or did you allow yourself to be interviewed and speak with Mr. Boring about this case as well?
Mm-hmm.
Did you agree to look at whatever it was that he wanted to show you?
Yes.
And in fact, did he send you materials to look at?
He did.
Okay. Did he offer to send anything at all to you that you declined and said, no, I'm not going to look at that?
No.
We provide you materials. He's had an opportunity to. You've seen whatever you've seen. Is that a fair statement?
Fair statement.
Okay. You talked a little bit about fluid intelligence, and I'm not sure that I completely understood that. But we're talking about smart people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's one way to think about it. Smart people.
Yeah. Well, I guess the real question that needs to be asked is, well, you agree, Ross is smart.
Yes.
And he's a college educator.
Yes. When we think about intelligence, okay, Ross would classify as an intelligent person. He went to college. He was successful there. He was able to get gainful employment in a job doing some kind of programming out of university. So he would classify as a person that's high in general intellectual abilities. Yes.
As a scientist, as a researcher, when you're studying memory and memory failures in particular, you're telling us that cognitive ability, intelligence, would be one factor that you would want to look at.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you were aware of that factor in this case?
Yeah, I actually asked you
Okay.
whether or not that had ever been tested because I thought it was important.
Okay. You, the real question is, are smart people, are they immune from these kinds of memory failures?
No. We can't, on a local basis, for any person at any point in time, ever predict whether they're going to remember or forget. That's just, unfortunately, not where we are as a science of memory. We know the factors that matter, the same factors that I talked about, and we also know about person factors. And so we know that when a person has more horsepower, that they remember better. That in no way makes them immune to forgetting. The best basketball players, the best hockey players, the very best, they still make errors. Right? The very best of us are not immune to having failures in anything that we do. It's just a protective factor.
All right, so you and I talked about cues during the direct, and then Mr. Bourne followed up and kind of ran through a list of stuff. I don't remember what they all were. Cup, an email which would have concerned his son. It went over some other things. My recollection is that you answered yes to every single question, that it could be a cue. Does that mean that it was an effective cue under the circumstances?
Assuming that there is a memory failure in this case, they were not effective cues. Okay? Well, we know that the defendant held the cup. We know Ross held the cup. We know that Ross read these emails and engaged in text where Cooper was brought up. We know that those things happen. Assuming that this is a memory failure, those weren't particularly effective cues. I believe, assuming that this is a memory failure, that the reason why is simply because I've looked through this, and I can't find a single experience that I know that Ross had that day that signaled to him that something was different, unique, or weird about the situation, in the way that the shoe not being on your foot would signal to you that it's weird.
You used a phrase there, I want to make sure that it's real clear why you use that phrase. You use the phrase, assuming there is a memory failure. Right? Why are you phrasing it that way? Why do you have to assume it was a memory failure in order to even have a discourse about cues?
Right. If you don't believe that there's a memory failure, and naturally, right, you would think that all of these things would be cues if you didn't know that much about memory cues, how they remind you about things. You could be very convinced, right, of other possible alternatives. My role here is just to talk about the science of memory. I don't want to give any type of overt opinion because I can't be sure. That's just the nature of science. We quantify our uncertainty, actually, because we can never be sure. So I can say, in the case where you would believe, or that the assumption would be made that this was a memory failure, why wouldn't any of these things that he experienced, that all of us would think, well, why is that not a cue? Why didn't that remind you? I'm trying to explain this is why it would not have reminded him. Or even if it could have been a great reminder, there's still some likelihood that it wouldn't have reminded him, assuming that there's a memory failure. And that's why I say assuming that there's a memory failure. It's not because I'm biased one way or the other way. I just want to be talking about the science, the factors.
That's an assumption that has to be made to even have the conversation.
It's an assumption that has to be made to even have the conversation. That's why I'm here, is under the assumption.
I want to talk a little bit about, you were asked about some specific statements, if you were aware, he said this, if you were aware, he said that. First of all, do you recall if you were given the opportunity to read or have a copy of Ross's statement to police?
I am highly confident that I was given that.
Okay. And you would agree it's long and it's detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Have you committed it to memory?
Mm-hmm. No, I have not. I agree that it's long. I agree that it's detailed. And I also agree that I have not committed it to memory.
All right. Well, as a memory expert, let me ask you this. Does stress, real stress, does it affect our cognitive ability? And does real stress affect our ability, our memory?
Mm-hmm. I'm not a stress researcher. We have an entire class on stress and why, right? It has to do with hormones in the brain. And, when a person is having a stressful experience, there's a direct impact on memory.
Okay.
We know that. That's just science.
Right. You've had some familiarity with the facts of the case and with Ross's interview. Would you agree that losing your child, being arrested, read your Miranda rights, and interrogated by the police, would you agree that that would be a stressful environment?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Would you agree then that perhaps statements made during the course of such an interrogation and recall and memory of things during such a stressful environment might be affected?
I would agree with that statement.
We don't remember as well when we're under stress. Is that fair to say?
And we don't remember the events occurring around us when we're stressed as well either.
Do you have any recall or recollection that during his interview, Ross told police, "I'm losing my mind, please forgive me"?
No.
Don't remember that? You remember during his interview, Ross told police, "I just don't know what to do, man."
No.
Remember during his interview, Ross said, and please forgive me, I'm trying to get my shit together.
No, I don't remember reading or seeing that.
I'll show you a page from the interview, you can see it with the highlighted area.
Mhm.
Just read it to yourself. Okay. Does that refresh your memory that this was part of the interview with Ross?
This does.
Okay. What did Ross tell you, please?
The highlighted section with the H beside it says, "I'm tired right now, man."
Is it possible to have a memory failure like we've talked about without any distractions at all?
Are you talking about the memory failure in terms of what he's saying about the events around his morning, or are you talking about memory failure like the infant being left in the car? I
Yes.
just don't know which memory failure you're talking about.
Yes, Lady Cooper and Clark.
And that the stress could have,
What I'm asking is this. The memory failure you testified about earlier, of Lady Cooper and Clark, is it possible you can have that kind of memory failure without any distractions at all?
well, yes.
You talked about distractions as a component, right? Is that fair to say?
It's just a factor.
But sometimes, or does your research bear out that sometimes you can have these kind of memory failures without any distractions?
And even under best case scenarios, for whatever reason, you may get onto some type of other routine that can lead to this impression that you completed intentions that you haven't completed. And it's not because you were distracted, it's not because you were doing anything unusual, it's just a feature of the way we behave.
You talked about frustration or fatigue being a component that you looked at, that you would look at as something which might aid the occurrence of such a memory failure. But is it possible that you have such a memory failure without any fatigue at all? On your best day?
And in fact, when we study memory, and we need to know something about how it works, our experiments won't work if people always remember or if they always forget. You know, the data would be useless. We wouldn't know if these factors that we're studying create any changes. So in fact, you know, even under best case scenario, we usually study memory and attention in an area where performance is kind of not perfect. So then we say, from that not perfect level, does distraction hurt? Does it help? Or does it have no effect? And so, when I talk about these factors, they're always relative to some control condition where that factor is not present at all. But they're still failures.
Are you aware that Ross has been referred to as a master of exaggeration?
Yeah, I've heard some people say that.
Okay. You aware that during his interview, he, when he said he took Cooper to Chick-fil-A 2 or 3 times a month, you aware that he also said that they'd seen him at Chick-fil-A 100 times?
Mm-hmm.
You aware of that? Are you aware that he said he'd been by the County Police Department 1 billion times?
I wasn't aware of that, but I don't remember being aware of that.
But you do remember, or rather, do you remember seeing an email that Ross sent at almost 1 o'clock in the morning to a coworker on the morning of the 18th?
Mm-hmm. That was provided to me.
Okay. And you talked to Mr. Boyne about that email as well?
Mm-hmm.
And do you recall that that email specifically dealt with a project that Ross was expressing great frustration in his inability to complete?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take that into consideration when whether or not there was fatigue going on in Ross's life that morning.
I did take that into consideration.
And it's still your opinion that evidence of that evidence is some fatigue or frustration?
Yes, I think that that's evidence that there could have been fatigue in his case. I don't know whether there was or not. I'm just saying that now we know from multiple nights that he was awake, that he wasn't sleeping. We know that he slept more on this night. We know that he was, on top of being physically tired, I assume, just given his texting patterns over the nights, he was also mentally, stress is a bad word, because stress means that there's a hormone release, and he could just be preoccupied with negative thoughts about work, like an internal distraction. And that those negative thoughts, we call them ruminations, also creates mental fatigue. There could be physical fatigue, there could be mental fatigue, but that's a could be. I certainly don't know. I didn't assess that.
And all this might just mean nothing.
And all of this could mean nothing.
Because he might have just forgot just because he forgot. I think that.
The few things, defense counsel asked you if he exaggerates, and he said 2 or 3 times a month. As I said, you were made aware that his wife actually corroborated that it was every other week he would go to Chick-fil-A with Cooper.
Right, because you said it is.
Right. And if her statement says that, it says that, right? Also, you talk about memory failures and things like that. Some of these memory failures, just assuming this was a memory failure, that could be self-inflicted by your own behaviors, right? Your own negligent acts. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that statement. I don't think that anybody is being negligent or self-inflicting any kind of thing on themselves.
So if they're making themselves tired by randomly messaging women at all hours of the night and not being awake enough to take care of your kid, you don't think that that's a self-inflicted wound right there?
I don't think that that's a very accurate characterization of what's going on here.
Okay. The lack of sleep we got for those last 3 days you were talking about, if he was lacking sleep, it was because he was up messaging random women at all hours and men at all hours of the night.
And working on his work.
The one email you saw.
And you said that he was trying to search for passports for his son. Mm-hmm. And you said that he was being a bad parent, but he went to Chick-fil-A with his son rather than dropping him off at I guess that's why I'm just a little bit confused about what it is that you're driving at.
You would agree that if he was fatigued from all that messaging at all hours of the night, that was something he chose to do, correct?
I would say sensibly that he chose to text. He chose to work. He chose to engage in activities. He didn't choose to be tired. He didn't choose to be negligent under the assumption that there's a memory failure, of course. He didn't choose to do any of this. I think that that's an...
He didn't make the decision to stay up late doing that stuff?
He absolutely made the decision to stay up late doing that stuff, but that doesn't mean that he reflected on the consequences of it. And certainly, who would ever, under the assumption of a memory error, who would ever assume that something this bad could happen?
Were you aware of just how aware he was of the dangers of leaving a child in a car?
Yes, I am aware of that, actually. I think most parents are.
He was very aware of all the dangers and knew all about it and the ways to prevent it. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that. I do agree with the fact that he knows about this phenomenon, like most parents.
And you just talked a little bit about, stress having an effect on memory, even if you're smart or something like that. Would you agree, though, if you're looking at a statement and the person is able to give all these details about that incident and then leaves out one big one that really makes him look guilty, he could have done that intentionally?
Yes, a person could absolutely do that intentionally.
And just to make sure we're clear, that when he said, "I'm tired right now," in his statement, you realize that was in the evening, right? when he was being interviewed by the police?
I didn't read the timestamp.
Okay, well, if the child was in the car all day, and it was after work that he pulled the child out, and then he had to go to the police department and then gave a statement, that's way, 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 way later than 9:25 a.m. when he locked or closed the door on his child. You would agree with that? So saying I'm tired, that was almost 12 hours later, possibly. 10 hours, 12. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Brewer. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
I think we're going to need your approach.
David. Yeah, why does it take 10 minutes here, talking to each other, to say, hey, it's time for lunch? I don't know if it's here yet, but I know it's on its way, because Ms. Reese is about
Here,
working.
they're rolling their cars down the hallway.
They worked together for a long, long time. He knows everything you do with how things work around the courthouse, and I've become somewhat of an expert too. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break, push notepads, step out to the jury room. We'll have lunch for you very shortly. Keep it up in mind, no conversation with the jury.
That's all right. Please watch your step going down.